This man is Charles Rain, and he's not having plastic surgery to get rid of his wrinkles. As a known terrorist, he needs a new face because there's a picture of the old one in every airport on the planet, which is very bad for business. The doctor suggests one last look in his face before becoming a new person, but Rain declines. He doesn't live in the past. Well, maybe he should, because the future is not looking great for him. We see a bunch of SWAT vans approaching that location. An FBI agent is briefing the team, and he says this is not the first time Rain gets an extreme makeover. He keeps changing his face all the time. At the operating room, the doctor keeps checking the clock nervously. Bain begins to suspect his medical team. They're clearly waiting for something to happen at 12 o'clock. So he grabs the scalpel and uses it to attack the doctor right before the agents arrive. Jumping through the window, Rain ruins lunch for a bunch of people and manages to keep running, only to get hit by a police car. Surrounded by agents, the terrorist is finally arrested. A week later, we see a beautiful flight attendant going about her duties when a man puts a gun to her head and demands access to the flight deck. Crazy sight for a gens, but back in the day you could get some wild carry-on past security. Anyway, the girl's reaction is more annoyed than frightened. She kicks him in the leg, and a middle-aged passenger grabs his gun. It's all so perfectly timed that it looks choreographed. And it really was. The truth is, this is not even a real plane. That dude with the gun is former Special Agent John Cutter. His job is to teach this bunch of civilians how to deal with a terrorist. Because how else would you stop them? Metal detectors. You're scaring the 90s. That flight attendant is a woman named Marty. She is questioning Cutter's approach to potential hijackers. He has instructed the crew to obey their orders and avoid putting more lives in danger. Marty takes issue with that part of the training and makes sure to bring up John's status as a former agent. Trying to swallow his pride, he begins to explain the rationale behind his advice. But he gets interrupted by Sly Delvecchio, an old friend of his who dismisses the group so they have a word in private. Even before he asks anything, John says he has no interest in his offers. Sly may mock all the stuff he's been doing, like training feisty flight attendants, but it's a decent job, and he likes it. Deaf to all of this, his friend says he's already set up a lunch meeting with Mr. Ramsey, the CEO of Atlantic International Airlines. Sly says this is not even about the opportunity. He's worried about John's mental health. Because nothing spells peace of mind like leading a counterterrorism unit, right? Meanwhile, Charles Rain is getting catcalled in the prison hallway on his way to meet his lawyer. He finds out that he'll be sent to California, where they have the death penalty there. His lawyer plans to claim insanity. He says it shouldn't be too hard, considering his childhood records. Now that attorney has forgotten rule number 1 of the Crazy People Manual, which is, do not call them crazy. Rain then tries to break the table using the lawyer's head, while strongly advising against future mentions of his childhood. Someone got their fair share of edges, apparently. Speaking of past traumas, we now learn what happened to John. He had a wife named Lisa. On Christmas Eve a few years ago, the happy couple was at a convenience store when an armed man came in. As a man of the law, John thought it was his duty to step in and save the day. That didn't end well for Lisa, who was held hostage by the robber. John put his gun down as requested, but the man pulled the trigger anyway. He didn't go very far after that, but that's little consolation for the now widower. So that's how John went from special agent to plain babysitter. But that might be about to change. To Sly's surprise, John does show up for his lunch with Mr. Ramsey. He is offered a high position at the security department, and he decides to take it. Maybe it's time to come back to life after all. Delighted to see one idea finally catching, Sly walks him all the way to his flight to Leh. 2 FBI agents are escorting Charles Rain to the same flight. It seems like he'll be enjoying his numbered days in California after all. Other passengers include a mysterious Monsieur Forget and a micromanaging mother who should not have named her boy Norman for that exact reason. The flight attendants are Marty, who's not so happy to see John as a passenger, and a young girl named Sabrina. One of the FBI agents seems to like Sabrina, but the prisoner couldn't care less about his love interest. Rain has actually made a friend of his own, and he's no other than Little Norman. The boy pretends to shoot with his fingers, and Rainey plays along. He tells the agents he was never allowed any toys as a kid. As the plane takes off, John turns on the help me light on his seat, but Marty makes a point to ignore him. She tells her new friend that he's a security expert, and Sabrina says she feels safe already. That seems to be a common effect John has on the ladies. If it weren't for the rain cloud of grief over his head, he could be a real womanizer. Norman's mom calls Sabrina to ask her about the man in handcuffs. She wants to know how dangerous he is, instead of stating the obvious, that both their guesses are just as good. The sweet girl reassures her that everything's okay, and even offers some soda to the little psycho. Tired of waiting for his aspirin, John decides to get it himself. Bumping into Marty, he apologizes for being harsh the other day, but she might be the only female who's completely unaffected by his charm. He's forced to admit that he's not really the bravest flyer and asks her to check on him from time to time. Marty brings an elderly chatterbox to take the seat right next to his. A little company will calm his nerves. Things start to get interesting when the passenger's meal is about to be served. Although the FBI agents have ordered chicken, Sabrina serves them a pair of bullets. Rain is then helped out of those cuffs by Monsieur Forget. John is at the toilet when the screaming begins, and he cannot believe this is happening. Dude can't catch even a bathroom break. Rain enters the cockpit and asks who's in charge. The pilot gives him the wrong answer. When he asks again, the two co-pilots are quick to say Rainey is the one in charge. While he makes the traditional hijacking announcements, John grabs the plane phone and calls Sly Del Vecchio. But his friend takes so long to get to the phone that one of the hijackers begins to suspect the gentleman who's taking that long at the toilet. Impersonating a panicked civilian in the most pathetic way, John manages to narrate the current events in such a way that Sly gets the picture. Then he subdues the hijacker and holds him hostage. Rain picks a passenger wearing pastel colors as the perfect hostage for himself, while Sabrina grabs her colleague. Then, the terrorist almost reenacts John's trauma. He says poor Mr. Pastel's family had a good chance to see him again. But that was before John decided to interfere. Mr. Pastel is going nowhere now. When Rain grabs a second innocent passenger, John obeys him and drops his gun. Then Rain fires at his own buddy, disgusted by his incompetence. There's a commotion among the passengers and Marty takes the opportunity to escape. She gets into the elevator with John. There's another crew member at the lower level, a guy named Vincent. They tell him about the situation upstairs, and he says they should obey Mr. Rain. As nobody has named the terrorist so far, it's now obvious that this is actually one of the bad guys. John beats him up, and he's rendered unconscious. Now John's plan is to dump all the fuel, hopefully forcing Rain to bring the plane down. Marty wants to know what happened to his earlier philosophy and why he's not obeying the hijacker as he taught everyone. Also, she thinks it's a bit too risky to mess with a jumbo jet like that. John looks her in the eye and tells her to trust him because he's the best. It turns out Marty is not immune to the spell after all, so she lets him go ahead. Rain will probably be mad at them for this, but he would be just furious to see Sly right now. He is gossiping about Rain's childhood. A bunch of other guys gasp in horror when they hear about the extent of his daddy issues. Then Mr. Ramsey comes in, and he's not pleased with Sly or the FBI. No one had told him the infamous Charles Rain was going to board one of his planes. Now the aircraft is losing altitude way too fast, and it's obvious that there's something wrong. Lake Lucille is the closest airstrip to their location, and they'll have to land there eventually. Ramsey is sending Sly there on a chopper to keep him informed before this mess hits the news. John and Marty are bracing themselves and preparing for the worst. Rain calls them and congratulates John's idea about the fuel. They will be forced to land as a result of that, but it doesn't mean he will be stopped. While Sly goes through his first helicopter ride in pure terror, Rain and the control tower at Lake Lucille exchange a few insults. Their airstrip is not even designed for that kind of aircraft, but there's no other options for Flight 163. At the nearby carnival, people are a bit scared of the huge plane flying so low. They are almost on the ground when Monsieur Forget finds the two heroes. Grabbing Marty, he kicks John off the plane. Mr. Ramsey is talking to Sly now about how to handle the situation. If things get ugly, he can't say anything about John Cutter. And if it ends well, the press should be informed that it was thanks to the airline counterterrorism specialist that was sent to accompany Charles Rain. At Lake Lucille, the authorities are there to take action right away. And the first thing they do is to arrest John. He says he's airline security, but no one believes him. Chief Leonard Biggs is at the control tower now. The negotiations begin, but he informs Rain that he is not authorized to grant any of his demands yet. Throwing a body out of the plane door, Rain says that Chief Biggs will get 5 more gifts like this one. That will keep happening until the plane is fully fueled. Alternatively, he could bring the fuel right now in exchange for 100 passengers, which is about half the number of hostages at the moment. Biggs says the fuel is on its way. The trade begins and John is brought to the tower. Realizing his opponent's misfortune, Rain can't miss the chance to make it worse. He calls Biggs again to say one of his men has left the plane without permission. A black guy. Rain says he no longer cares what happens to him. Now that John is detained and out of his way, the terrorist gives a few instructions to Sabrina and moves on with his new plan. As promised, half of the passengers are released, but Rain and 2 other hijackers take that opportunity to blend in and leave the plane. Meanwhile, John fights off the local cops and escapes on a police motorcycle. Chief Biggs is not pleased to hear that, but says they shouldn't try and chase this crazy guy. They clearly can't handle him anyway. By now he has figured out Rain's move and realized he had probably headed to the fairground. And sure enough, the 3 stooges are trying to steal a car when Vincent sees they have company. Rain tells him to put his gun away and focus on securing transportation. He'll focus on John Cutter himself. At the control tower, the FBI finally arrives. Agent Dwight Henderson asks for a full report on the situation. Not impressed by the way the locals are handling it, he also reveals that John Cutter is indeed airline security. Too late for that now, though. One of Rain's goons tries to take him down in the middle of the crowd, but hits a mime instead. The poor performer dies as silently as he lived, while Rain comes to join his goon. They keep chasing John, who then climbs the Ferris wheel for absolutely no good reason. Rain keeps shooting while the other guy climbs up as well, but John kicks him off. Coming down, he chases Rain until the FBI joins him, and the terrorist is caught once again. For such a famed escape artist, this guy keeps getting arrested an awful lot of times. Much more comfortable on firm ground, Sly finally meets his friend. Agent Henderson is there too, and he apologizes to John for the unfair treatment. That's when the second part of the scheme is revealed. Sabrina and Forget still have the other 100 passengers at gunpoint. The hostages are going to suffer the consequences if they refuse to let the mastermind go free. John advises them to take the threat seriously. He has seen what Rain is capable of. What no one sees is that Vincent is quietly infiltrated among the FBI agents. After everything he's been through, John is allowed to personally interrogate the notorious terrorist. That doesn't do any good, unfortunately. Rain says he's been a worthy opponent, but they both know he'll never go to jail. Not caring for human lives gives him an unbeatable advantage. So the FBI comes up with the very worst idea in the history of the Bureau. They will put that man back on the plane, pretending to agree with his terms. He'll be escorted to the door by 2 agents. A strategically positioned sniper will be ready for the signal to take down whoever they can. So basically, they're gonna pretend so well that there's little difference between that and actually agreeing with his terms. It just makes 0 sense. John is in charge of the operation now, and he watches in absolute horror when the sniper takes down the two agents escorting Rain. That's because Vincent had overpowered both snipers, secretly taking their place. There's a massive shootout with disastrous consequences. Vincent is gone now. Agent Henderson is badly wounded, and the airplane starts to move. John and Sly get into Chief Big's car and tell him to chase the plane. They get as close as possible for the extravagant move John has in mind. He jumps out of the car and grabs the landing gear, climbing it all the way into the aircraft. Sly and Biggs are in total disbelief. Up in there, the attendants are still serving dessert with a terrorist hijacking underway. But Rain seems to have set his mind on a particular piece of candy, so much so that Sabrina even gets a little jealous. Rain then wonders what could be taking Monsieur forget that long. You know the answer, right? John is kicking his with his unique mixture of karate, kung fu, and sheer madness. After Monsieur Forget is permanently neutralized, John simply pops up into the flight deck. The pilots at this point are shocked at nothing. He tells them to turn the plane around, and they go, okie dokie. Sensing the shift, Rain sends his second favorite girl to check the crew. That is John's chance to knock her out. He's too much of a gentleman to permanently neutralize a pretty lady. Now Rain is the only baddie left. He engages in a messy fight with John, breaking one of the windows and causing such decompression that the cabin door pops off, almost sucking poor Marty out. John manages to pull her back to safety and kicks Rain to hell once and for all. The passengers are finally free to go home, and Marty is ready to give John a chance. Talking to the press, Sly takes all the credit for the successful operation. And this is the end. This was a recap of the 1992 movie Passenger 57 by Warner Bros., starring Wesley Snipes and Bruce Payne. So, which character made the dumbest decisions? And which part of the story was the hardest to believe? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.